Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Crypto Craze. And with the retreat of crypto markets dominating headlines, I'm joined now by Bruce Fenton, CEO and founder of Atlantic Financial, Chainstone Labs, and the Satoshi Roundtable retreats to discuss the latest news. Bruce, firstly, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, start off today, it's not a normal day here in the crypto markets. We've seen Bitcoin and most alts tanking over the course of the day, losing double-digit percentages. What's your take on it all? What do you think on this day of red?
Well, there's a couple things, I think. One is a lot of the digital assets are still overvalued. There's still a lot of junk out there that has these very, very high valuations that just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Typically, to have something be worth hundreds of millions or tens of millions or even $1 billion, you need to have some way that people are going to get that money back. Typically, that's been because it's something like a stock that has earnings or something like that. And you don't have that with a lot of the digital assets. So I think that as bad as this is, it's still not the end for some of these digital assets. Bitcoin and the higher quality assets, on the other hand, hopefully this is just the kind of typical types of swings that they've had in the past, which it's generally recovered from.
Certainly. I mean, interesting that you make that distinction. I wonder if, in your mind, where is the distinction drawn between a quality coin and, to use the local lingo, a shit coin? Where would you draw that distinction in your own mind?
Yeah, it's tricky because the most high quality coin is Bitcoin, and that has the largest market cap. But even Bitcoin is still very risky and speculative. It's a speculative, risky asset. I believe in it. I believe it is superior technology. I think we can demonstrate and prove that it's superior technology, but superior technology doesn't always win in terms of economic performance. There's a lot of times in history where superior inventions have not succeeded. So even Bitcoin is not a sure thing. So that's maybe the easiest one to think of as sort of a quality asset. Some of the other assets that I consider quality assets they're even more risky than Bitcoin. So it's all relative compared to this crazy market that we're in, where we've had these very high overvaluations and these radical price swings that we've had ever since these markets have existed.
Certainly, radical price swings seem to be the name of the game in this market still, despite trying to get that modicum of institutional investment and the sort of relative stability that would come with that. But I want to note, and to sort of pull back a little bit, you tweeted recently that new trading markets grow from drips and not from tidal waves. But a day like today, in which you see such volatility and such pullback, does that contribute to the dripping, or is that actually the sort of thing that can really put a bad reputational spin on a marketplace where they're trying to get new investors on board?
It's both. It's part of the natural cycle of markets, and it's part of the natural cycle of these markets. However, it is a concerning thing. You can't have continued volatility a lot. If so many people lose that it turns them off to the sector, which has already happened, and that's continued to happen. That makes it harder for the asset class to do well. So it is something to be concerned about. I don't believe in these sort of memes of sort of never worry about it kind of thing, for exactly the reason that I mentioned. Just because it's superior technology doesn't mean that it's going to work economically. And so it is a concern when you have these kind of drops, because you look at the chart, and the long-term chart now looks similar to the way that a lot of these great bubbles in history, the mining bubble, the railroad bubble, and some of these bubbles where they sort of go up and then reach highs, and then they level in at about half of the all-time high, and then they kind of drop off. So it is concerning. It's something, and I say that not because I am a bear or because I don't believe in the technology or don't believe in Bitcoin, but because I plan for the worst case scenario. And that's what you need to do. It's just like OPSEC, just like you should always plan as if somebody is trying to hack you. You should always plan for the worst, and you should have a plan to at least consider the possibility that this really is an illusion and won't work. I hope that's not the case, and I'm not betting that that's the case, but it's something you should be aware of. And so it is concerning when you have these kind of drops.
There's certainly sage advice for any investing in this sphere to be wary of potential dips and roundabouts. And I want to ask you, Bruce, as well. I mean, comparing the sort of the crypto asset class to the larger equity markets, we've seen in the last day or so some drops in the main equity markets in the US. The last one most notably seemingly tied at any rate to democratic pursuits of Trump and his administration, whatever else. I don't want to get into the politics of the matter. Simply the point I want to make is there was a narrative running through Bitcoin for a long time that said that it was now a safe haven investment, comparable to gold and in line with that. And that narrative seems to have been well and truly busted on a day like today. What do you make of those sort of narratives running through the market?
Yeah, I've never thought of Bitcoin as a safe haven. I've been a huge Bitcoin fan for a long time. I've done very, very well with Bitcoin as an early adopter. But as a financial advisor, which is my career since long before Bitcoin, ever since I was a teenager, basically, I've been in the financial services business in some form or another. And from that standpoint, I look at portfolio management and risk management. It's all about risk. And Bitcoin is a risky asset, and it has always been a risky asset. And I've never really viewed it as a safe haven. Having said that, I think it makes sense to have some exposure to it because it does, have exposure to an asset that's different than the other kinds of assets. And so I think most people who have no Bitcoin are underexposed. They should have some Bitcoin, but a lot of people who have Bitcoin and other crypto assets tend to be overexposed.
Do you think with that, I mean, do you think the strength in Bitcoin particularly lies in its uncorrelated nature to other asset classes? It's sort of the wild card people can throw into an investment portfolio to hedge against potential downturns in one asset class or another?
Yeah, it's partly that it is somewhat non-correlated. In a big economic downturn, which a lot of people are looking at now, we've had some years of economic growth, and we've had generally decent market performances across global markets. And there's a lot of speculation that we're now entering a true global economic downturn. And when that happens, risky and speculative assets get hurt. And so Bitcoin and other crypto assets would be in that category. So it may not be a hedge. It really depends on overall market performance. It's a case where things outside of our ecosystem could affect it. If everybody's losing lots of money on their other investments, it makes them more likely to cash in their crypto assets to pay their expenses and bills or take some profits or whatever it may be.
So, see, that's an interesting point you raised there, Bruce, because so many people I speak to in the sphere, and perhaps, yes, they are the diehard crypto fans, but they say that they're waiting for that economic crisis to occur so that it can prove the fidelity of Bitcoin as a potential holder, as a safe haven, as a place to store value, whatever it may be. You seem to directly contradict that narrative.
So sort of, there's two different parts of the economy that we would need to look at. One is sort of economic growth as measured by companies and earnings and stock market performance, how those things do. And that, I don't think it's a great non-correlated asset. The other part of the global economic picture that we look at is cash and money. What is money? And money is broken. The world's money in fiat is broken. It's not working. It's a bad system. And it's as bad as some of the worst sort of altcoins. And so that piece, I think you're correct. Or the people who are saying this are correct, that we could have an economic fiat crisis where fiat crashes, and Bitcoin would be a great hedge against that. Where it is real money, it is sound money, it's based on limited supply, and absolutely, if we see the countries of the world end up in a Zimbabwe situation where they can't print their way out of a devaluation situation, then Bitcoin would be great. But that's, as I mentioned, that's one part of it. You have kind of real estate, and then you have enterprises and stocks, and then you have cash. They should be looked at differently.
Certainly, and I want to change the sort of key of the conversation here right now, because I've looked notably at your Satoshi Roundtable retreats, and I find the notion of them very interesting. I want to ask a little bit, firstly, if you could break it down for our viewers a little bit about the Satoshi Roundtable retreats. Tell us a little bit about what happens there and what.
Sure. So it's an annual retreat, an event that we've hosted. It'll be coming up on its sixth year now. We've done 5 of them, and we've done a few other interesting events as well. And it's the biggest thing that characterizes that it's limited in space. So we keep it to a small number of people, a couple hundred people, and their guests. And it's characterized by a lot of deep dives, deep discussion. A lot of great people have come. I see Ron Paul on there, and Charlie Lee in that picture, and I really try to avoid words like leaders and things like that. It's very tricky in a space like this, but there is merit. There is people who have done a lot of great things. There's people who do have influence, and they have done development, or they're scientists, or they're successful CEOs, and so we always try and make room for those people, and we've been working also on kind of expanding this sort of community, discussion and club, if you will, to have more events. We're doing a couple small ones called side tables. We have one coming up in October on the 17th and 18th of October here in New Hampshire, and part of that will be at the farm that we're working on building a sort of crypto hangout and retreat in a decentralized space without any headquarters. I think people find it nice to go and gather, which is why events are so popular in our industry. So we're trying to make something that has that feel, again, characterized by deep discussion, small groups, we're very low. Typically, we've never had sponsors, so it's different than a lot of your other kind of events. And we're trying to do more of that. And I'm looking forward to doing more of those in New Hampshire, especially at this farm, just kind of getting away in nature and in a private, quiet location and discussing. A lot of people's favorite parts of a conference is the discussions that you have in the hall or the dinners. And that's kind of what the roundtable is all about. There's very few, other than people like Ron Paul, there's very few sort of scheduled speeches. It tends to be just people talking. And we're trying to duplicate that on a smaller scale with a lower price point, and also something that, one of the valid criticisms of the roundtable is that not everybody can come. And I feel terrible about that, because I believe in openness and a decentralized space, but it's just a reality of kind of supply and demand. If we let everybody want to come, then it would be Consensus, which is a great event. I love Consensus. It's my second favorite event in the industry, but it is a very different feel. And I personally enjoy a smaller kind of event, and a lot of our attendees do as well. So that's basically what we're working on with it. It's been pretty successful so far, and I kind of view it almost like a bit of a community asset. In the future, I'm going to look at ways that we might, maybe even make the ownership more of a community kind of thing. Maybe like the TED Talks or something like that, where it's it sort of belongs to everybody. And I think that's one of the successes of it, that we've tried to not make it about promoting any particular sponsor or anything, but try to make it just a place for people to go and gather and have good discussion.
Well, Bruce, it certainly sounds like a worthwhile event, some good places to develop, and as we've just seen at the end of our own Tel Aviv Blockchain Week here, it is so valuable when you get people into that room together, get off the computers, get to meet face-to-face, and actually have a chance to hash some things out. It's amazing what can happen out of that. But I want to thank you now, Bruce Fenton, for coming on to BLOCKTV and having this meaningful discussion about what's happening in the space right now, where it's heading in the future, and some of the big events upcoming. Thanks so much for joining us on BLOCKTV, and stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.